And then they reshot big portions of this movie and blowing up the budget until we got this, which is this abomination. Featuring some horrific, some terrifying looking CGI dwarves. I'm like, why don't you just hire regular dwarves? Peter Dinklage, okay? He had all that shit to say about, like, oh, they shouldn't be getting dwarf actors in movies. Like, first of all, Peter Dinklage, you're a talented man. I like you a lot, all right? You're great in Game of Thrones. You've given great performances throughout your career in TV and film. But you are not king of the dwarves, okay? What you say is not law for old dwarves, all right? So stop it. Like, they could have just hired those because the dwarves in this movie are terrifying. All right, my friends, let's go ahead and move on to the worst movies of 2025 so far. I just did my best of list yesterday. Saw a lot of good movies so far in 2025. Some excellent films. Was just talking about it a minute ago. The Day the Earth Blew Up, a Looney Tunes movie, super underrated. Companion, a really great sci-fi horror comedy. Highly recommend that. And of course, Ryan Coogler's Sinners, which is my favorite film of the year so far. But even though I've seen a lot of great movies, I've also seen some pretty awful films. So awful that I managed to put together a top 10 list. No honorable mentions for right now. Don't worry. Towards the end of the year, towards the end of 2025, I will definitely be mentioning some truly horrible, but maybe not exactly terrible films that made the top 10 list, but they will deserve honorable mentions nonetheless. However, let's just go ahead and get right into it, chat, starting at number 10. Where is it? I got to scroll. Got it. Here we go. Starting at number 10, and this is more of like a disappointment for me. This is definitely like a personal disappointment because I was really looking forward to this movie. At number 10, I have Wolfman. Which was one of the first big movies to come out in 2025. Matter of fact, other than, Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Foul, which technically was the first movie that I saw in 2025, this must have been like the second or third. And I was really excited for this because this was directed and co-written by Leigh Whannell, who was coming off some really great horror and sci-fi films over the last couple years. Upgrade, of course, which was fantastic. The Invisible Man, which was such a wonderful a modern take on H.G. Wells', original story, original novella. And I thought, well, he did such great work of Upgrade. He did such great work of Invisible Man. Obviously, he's been working in the industry for 20 years, being one of the co-founders of the Saw franchise, the initial films, that is. He's going to do great work with the Wolfman. But sadly, this movie was a disappointment. Like, the one thing that I really did enjoy about it was how they approached the infection of getting bit by a werewolf. It was slow. It took its time. Had a lot of great body horror in it. Very similar to like a David Cronenberg movie. Very similar to Cronenberg's The Fly. I thought that was really cool. And a good performance by Christopher Abbott. The problem is that there was just so little for the other characters to do in the movie, particularly with Julia Garner, who's, coming off of Ozark and plays the wife of Christopher Abbott's character, and they have a young daughter, but they didn't really give them a lot of development in the film, and they're pretty much the characters that you're following in his movie, aside from maybe a couple other ones, but even then, their screen time is fleeting, and that's what you need. You can't just have like this slow transformation over time, which certainly is visually interesting. You got to have that narrative to go along with it to invest the audience. And sadly, that just wasn't on display. I was left wanting, as were I think a lot of people with this movie. Not the worst movie of 2025, but perhaps the most disappointing. One of the biggest disappointments for me. Because I just expected so much from Leigh Whannell, because I've liked so much of his previous work, especially Upgrade, Invisible Man. But sadly, Wolfman just didn't match the quality of those films. And that's why it's my number 10. My number 10. But moving on, chat, to something that I think is worse. Something that I think is even more disappointing. And this might be a bit of a hot take, but I really just did not like this movie. At number 9, I have Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. I know. A lot of people love the Mission Impossible franchise. Not every single entry in the franchise is great. I don't think, 2 has that many fans. And, my favorite Mission Impossible movies are like Mission Impossible 3 and 4, Ghost Protocol. But a lot of people have like really, really enjoyed the Christopher McQuarrie films. I guess starting technically with Rogue Nation and then Fallout, which I do like. But then, that led to Dead Reckoning, which wasn't exactly bad, but didn't reach the heights of those previous movies. And it's like, oh, don't worry, because they're going to deliver something even better with The Final Reckoning. And sadly, they don't. Outside of two really impressive action sequences, one more that was more thrilling, more tension building, I suppose, which involved Tom Cruise's Ethan Hunt on a submarine, and then later on a biplane, on an airplane, which was definitely well put together, there's no doubt. The rest of the movie I just found to be extremely disappointing. One, because it spends so much time delivering copious amounts of exposition delivered by characters, so many new characters that we don't even know. They get no room for development at all, no character depth whatsoever. And they spend so much of the film just referencing previous movies in the franchise, retconning certain events in the franchise. You know, the villain of this movie, Gabriel, he was there the whole time, manipulating things from the beginning, retconning one of my favorite Mission Impossible films, 3. In regards to the MacGuffin, which is this AI entity thing, which we really don't get to know. It's just essentially a plot device. And that's what so much of this movie is. It just feels like we're going from place to place, dealing with a new MacGuffin, dealing with a new plot device that gets us to another plot device. And I just found that frustrating. Like, I didn't really like a lot of the team dynamic in this one just because there were just so many new characters or characters coming back from the past. You know, maybe outside of one emotion moment that involved Ving Rhames' character, which I liked, but yeah, I really dislike this film. I think it's the weakest Mission Impossible since the second one. I think the franchise is at a point, even though they say it's the final. And that's the other thing, too. They say this is the final Mission Impossible movie. It's the final reckoning. But, like, how the movie ends, how it wraps up, it's like, this didn't really give me a sense of finality. You know, especially with these characters, at least with, like, the main members of the team. You know, with Tom Cruise or Simon Pegg, for instance. I just didn't feel that at all. It just felt like, by the time we got to the end, they were kind of like, all right, well, see you later, guys. See you at the next mission. It just, that I thought was disappointing. So, yeah, outside of maybe a couple cool action sequences and emotional Ving Rhames, it's a overly long, bloated film, filled to the brim of exposition, and just not enough, like, meaningful conversations between the team members, between the actors in this movie. So I really didn't care for this film at all. But it's not as bad as number 8, which a lot of people are liking, but I didn't care for this at all. Probably because it's just a shot-for-shot remake. And that movie is How to Train Your Dragon, which is a live-action remake, nearly a shot-for-shot remake of the 2010 animated film How to Train Your Dragon, which I really love. Recently just rewatched the movie, and it's great. But, like, this film, I'm sorry, because it's just a shot-for-shot remake, there's nothing about it that, like, really stands out. It's pretty much the exact same dialogue and the exact same sequences. It's just it happens to be in live action. It's like Gus Van Sant's Psycho. Honestly, that's essentially what it is. And yeah, I just really found this movie to be dull and pretty unnecessary. I suppose if you've never seen the original How to Train Your Dragon, you can get a lot of enjoyment by that, but the original How to Train Your Dragon exists, and I think it's just a much better movie. The other thing that I think just kind of disappoints me about this film is you have a lot of new characters, you have, obviously new actors playing characters that we're familiar with, and I just don't think they do a good enough job, particularly when it comes to the younger characters, the teenage characters in this. Like, as I said in my initial review, comparing it to Gus Van Sant's, Psycho remake, he did make one particular change, and he gave us a scene of Vince Vaughn vigorously masturbating. And so I asked myself, like, what is the Vince Vaughn masturbation scene in the How to Train Your Dragon live action remake? And it's just more scenes with the kid characters, and they're just all kind of wretched across the board. They're very annoying. They're, like, I think even more mean towards Hiccup in this film than they were in the original animated film. And there was absolutely no chemistry at all between Mason Thames, who I actually like as an actor. I want to see him in more things. He's coming off of, The Black Phone, which, he was very good in. But then you also have Nico Parker in this, and I really did not like her at all as Astrid. I thought her delivery was particularly flat and wooden. And again, like, the movie ends with, all right, well, the two of them are, are going to be in a relationship now. It's like, really? Like, how did that happen? Because there's never a moment where you felt like they actually liked each other. It was very weird. So, and again, the rest of the supporting cast with the kids. I really disliked them throughout the entire film. They had none of the charm of the original kids in the first film. So I know a lot of people enjoyed this movie, but I was not one of them. The original animated film exists, and it's considerably better than this. But moving on to number 7, I have 28 Years Later. I'll tell you what. I never would have thought I would have had this movie on my list for worst movies of 2025 so far, but here we are. I mean, just because I and so many other people were so enamored by the marketing and the trailers for this movie. I mean, you're also playing with the legacy of the 28 franchise. Starting with 28 Days Later, which is one of the most influential zombie movies, really of all time, but certainly of the 21st century, introduced the concept of fast zombies, fast infected, which led on to, influencing so many other zombie movies and in different mediums, whether it be like in Zack Snyder's remake of Dawn of the Dead, or even in video games like Left 4 Dead and Left 4 Dead 2. It's had a tremendous impact. And then, of course, you had 28 Weeks Later, which I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of. Some interesting ideas, excellent opening. But 28 years later, it had that incredible marketing campaign. The images were beautiful. The use of narration is just like, wow, this looks so great. And I thought it was a complete mess, even though it has a really cool premise where it does take place 28 years after the events of the film, where the UK is ravaged by this a horrific infection, the zombie infection. And now you have this isolated community that lives on the exterior of the UK on their own little island, and they make their way inland into the mainland, either to try to scavenge resources or as a rite of passage in this case, which involves Aaron Taylor Johnson's character, who's one of the warriors of this community, and his son, Alfie Williams. It just seemed to have a great premise, and just everything about it's like, the infected were also evolving at this point. It's like everything on paper sounded great, but the actual movie, I just had so many problems with it on a technical level. I hate the way this thing was edited. The use of archive footage from older movies, the use of the narration from the trailer, used here in the movie in a very awkward way. Didn't care for that, at all. And there's so many odd scenes. The film, of course, is directed by Danny Boyle, and it's also written by Alex Garland. And I feel like Alex Garland was more interested in themes than he was in actually telling a consistent story. There's just so many weird moments, whether involving a pregnant infected and just completely cutting the tension, being a very unintentionally funny moment. The pacing of the film is bizarre, especially in the second half where we're with Alfie Williams' character and Jodie Comer in that part of the movie. And a bonkers ending that just gives you tonal whiplash that completely took me out of the film. I mean, something on the level of, even though we're having this dark zombie film, it goes from that to Teletubbies to Power Rangers. I found it completely ridiculous. I was very, very disappointed by this film. And I think it's the weakest in the 28 franchise at this point. The first is my favorite. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think 28 Weeks Later is much better. Not by much, but it's better. This one I thought was a complete mess. And I personally don't have a lot of confidence in the next one. It's being directed by Nia DaCosta, who, even though I've seen most of their filmography, I've seen Candyman, I've seen The Marvels, and I did not care for either. And so I don't have a lot of faith in this next one, but we'll see. Hoping for the best, but going into it, I have no excitement. But it's not as bad as this film. At number 6, I have Captain America Brave New World. I forgot this movie came out because it was so forgettable. It's the 35th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it's the 4th film in the Captain America film series. Instead of following Chris Evans, Steve Rogers, Captain America, we're now following Anthony Mackie as Sam Wilson, taking on the mantle of Captain America and getting involved in the conspiracy. It involves the President of the United States, President Thunderbolt Ross, now played by Harrison Ford, and also bringing back characters from the Incredible Hulk franchise, specifically Tim Blake Nelson's The Leader, making his live-action debut. And listen, this movie was a complete mess. And we heard about it for years, how messy this movie was, how they reshot it 2, 3, 4 times or whatever. So many reshoots, blowing up the budget to something staggering like $400 million. It all sounded so bad. And it's bad. Is it the worst of the MCU movies? No. There are certain films that I think are worse, but it's definitely not one of the good ones. It's definitely on the lower end. And it's because, namely, it's not a movie about Captain America. Like Sam Wilson, there's so much you can do with that character as Cap. And they just don't. Like, the movie is more concerned with being a sequel to the Incredible Hulk films, really. You know, bringing in Thunderbolt Ross, bringing in Tim Blake Nelson's, you know, the leader. And it's just weird that you had like a Hulk movie essentially take over a Captain America film, especially because the Captain America movies that came before this one were so good, particularly Winter Soldier and Civil War. A lot would argue are some of the best Marvel movies. Winter Soldier is still my favorite MCU movie. I think it's one of the best superhero films ever made. So you have that legacy, and here it's just such a mess of being a sequel to another film, a film that I enjoyed. I actually like The Incredible Hulk. It's not perfect, but there's a lot I enjoy about it. But I don't need all that in my Captain America movie. I mean, you know, do something, do another film involving the Hulks. Don't do this. Don't have this take over. But and so many other characters that are coming in and out. Like the only particular person that has a character arc in this film is actually Harrison Ford as Thunderbolt Ross. He goes through an evolution, certainly a physical one, as the Red Hulk, which is fun and all, but if that's all you got, then that in itself is a disappointment. Again, the biggest thing that frustrates me about this movie is the fact that Sam Wilson has no character arc throughout this film. He does not change as Captain America, and you need that. And yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us already saw the writing on the wall for this movie. But yeah, actually seeing it was like, yep, that was not good. Especially when compared to the previous Captain America. I mean, it's the weakest one. I'm not even necessarily the biggest fan of the first Avenger. Love Chris Evans' performance in that as Steve, as Captain Rogers, and other performances in the movie like Haley Atwell. I thought she was excellent as Peggy Carter, and, you know, Toby Jones I thought was very good. Obviously, Sebastian Stan as Bucky was great in the movie. You know, there's a lot to appreciate. Tommy Lee Jones, of course. But I had aesthetic issues with that film. I didn't particularly care for how the Red Skull is presented. But that movie is infinitely better. That movie knows what it is compared to Brave New World. Brave New World doesn't know what it is. That's why it's so disappointing. That's why it's bad. But moving on, it's not as bad as this film. At number 5, I have Flight Risk. Some of you are like, wait, what's this movie? And this came out in the early part of the year. I think it might have been January or very early February. And it's essentially an action thriller starring Mark Wahlberg and Topher Grace, Michelle Dockery. Michelle Dockery plays a federal agent transporting Topher Grace, who knows some stuff about the mob, and the only way they can transport him is via this biplane piloted by Mark Wahlberg. Well, it turns out he's actually a hitman for the mob, and he's trying to kill the two of them before they, you know, make it to the trial, you know, and also to turn over all this evidence, so they can prosecute, essentially, all these criminals. And it's actually a good premise, like, on paper. It's just horrifically executed. And the person who horrifically executes it is Mel Gibson. Now, there's a lot you could say about Mel Gibson. Mad Mel Gibson, chat. All right? He has a colorful history, to say the least. But, to be positive, he is a good filmmaker. He is a good writer. He is a good actor. Although he's not acting in this. And you watch this movie, you know, again, Mel Gibson having directed such films as Braveheart, right? Oscar-winning Braveheart, you know, one of the defining films of the 1990s. He directed this movie. And you see none of that on display, like, in this film. All the performances across the board are either flat or ridiculous. Mark Wahlberg, who has had a colorful career as an actor, as a performer, he gives such a ridiculous, hokey performance where it feels like he's improvising most of the time. Like, it's like, okay, like, I like the idea of you being stuck with a psycho in an isolated environment, whether it be a house, a boat. I mean, there's all sorts of examples, right? Or an airplane. There's a lot you can play around with that, right? There's so much you can do. But here, it just feels like he's improvising. As we all know, Mark Wahlberg is not the strongest actor. I think he needs a lot of direction. And he certainly is not good at improv, because so many of his scenes, like his idea of playing a psychopath is, hey, you know what I was just thinking about right now? I was thinking about, like, tearing your face off and eating your eyeballs. Like, he's just saying stuff like that. It's like, it's it's comedic. It becomes unintentionally funny. Like, you never take him seriously as this psychotic, hitman. And that's the whole gist of the movie. That's what brings you to the theater, to see that. And if that's not working, then you don't got a film. You got something like Flight Risk, which is just this really just hokey, terrible movie. And that's why it's number 5 on my worst movies of 2025 so far. But there are 4 others that I think are worse. And at number 4, I have a Minecraft movie. Now, I like Minecraft. I'm not as into it as like other people are, but like back in the day, back in like 2012, I played it for, I think my total time in the game was like 24 hours, something like that. And I enjoyed it. Like, I made my house, I mined a whole lot, I went to the Nether, I defeated the Ender Dragon. I did all that fun stuff, like, oh, this is really cool. But like, some people are like really into this game, and I mean, all the power to them. I think it's super fun. Essentially, it's a base building game. It's a super creative game. You can create your own games within the game. There's a lot to it. I understand why it's become a cultural phenomenon. I think a lot of people understand that too. Like, and adapting it into like a movie or a TV show, I think that could be fun. I just want it to be better than a Minecraft movie, because this movie is so fucking annoying. I mean, really, it really is. The whole premise being, you're following Jack Black, who plays the character of Steve, is kind of like the default, player character in the game. There's a lore around him, I understand. And he just, after finding this plot device, after finding the MacGuffin, this cube, it transports him to the land of the overworld, I guess, the Minecraft land, essentially. He was able to create like all these things, interact with all these different creatures and monsters and animals and everything else in between. And it's like, that's all, well and good. But, the most of the movie focuses on these other characters who also come upon the Minecraft world. Jason Momoa, who plays this, 80s video game expert that now is just a loser. You have some kid characters in that. Sebastian Hansen, who is, this kid who wants to be creative, but everyone looks down on him because he's weird and he has interesting ideas. And he has his sister, played by Emma Myers, and, she's, still a child, but their parents died. It's that whole thing where now she has to be a parental figure. And Danielle Brooks, who's fat and black. I mean, that's what she is in the film. And you just follow them along with Jack Black in this world, and it really has no story. No one gets any character depth. No one has a character arc, because most of the movie, what it's just doing is referencing things from the video game and explaining and showcasing memes. Like, this is a meme movie, right? Like Chicken Jockey, like doing stuff like that where people go crazy in the theater and throw popcorn. I was lucky because I saw this the day it came out at the earliest screening possible. Where most of it was just a bunch of old people, a bunch of senior citizens sucking on, Werther's Originals, except for one kid that wouldn't, like, stop screaming for, like, the first 15 minutes, like, crying, like, violently crying. It was kind of crazy. But it didn't matter, though. It didn't matter. He wasn't, like, taken away from the film's narrative, because it doesn't really have a narrative. It's just, this movie is just like, hey, everyone loves Minecraft, right? Here's all these Minecraft references. Here's a meme. Here's a reference to various Minecraft players from real life and streamers. And I'm just like, but you want to tell me a story? Like, no, we're not going to tell you a fucking story. We're not here to do that. And I think that's really disappointing and frustrating, because I feel like the aesthetic I actually like the aesthetic of the movie. I like the way it looks. It's just that everything else about it, from the characters to the story everything that you can possibly think of, it's just horrible. And the comedy, that's the thing. Like, there's nothing worse than watching an unfunny comedy. I mean, listen, comedy is the most subjective of genres. Like, what I may not find funny, you may find hilarious. And clearly a lot of people found this hilarious. I did not. I didn't find it hilarious, like, Jack Black, like, shoving his face into Jason Momoa's, junk as they were flying across a fucking valley. I just, that didn't appeal to me. I didn't care for it. I just found these characters so reprehensible and annoying. But yeah, a lot of people seemingly did like this movie. A lot of people liked it for the memes and the GIFs and everything else and the references. But I really didn't. I didn't care for it, Chad. Lava Chicken, though, I have to admit, is a catchy song. It does get stuck in your fucking head. So I will admit that. But other than that, not very good. Minecraft movie, the 4th worst movie of 2025 so far. And number 3, I have another remake, chat. I have Snow White, Disney's Snow White. So listen, I'm kind of tired of all these live action remakes, or really just these Disney remakes, because just so many of them have been bad. Not all of them. Some have stood out. You know, Jungle Book, I still think is the best one. 2016's Jungle Book, where that managed to be as good, if not better, than the original animated film. I love the original animated film. Very well directed, you know, great use of the animals and the CGI, and the kid, I think, did a good job. A lot of people also point to Cinderella, right? But after that, you know, there's not too many great Disney remakes. Maybe they're not, like, god-awful, but I would say the majority are either mediocre or terrible. And Snow White, while it's not the worst, Pinocchio, you're still the absolute worst. Snow White is pretty bad. I mean, this movie never stood a chance. It really didn't. I mean, from the very beginning, especially how they were marketing this thing and how you had certain actors just saying a lot of stupid shit, namely, oh God, what's her name? Rachel Zegler, where she decided to demean and insult the original film and those that liked it, which was a colossal mistake. It's like, why do that? I mean, just putting her foot in her mouth every chance she got. And also you had the controversy of, well, it initially wasn't going to feature dwarves, except one dwarf. It was more going to be like this diverse group of thieves who are actually in the movie. They are in the film. But then everyone was freaking out over all the stupid shit that she was saying, and then everything in regards to the not dwarves, and then they reshot big portions of this movie and blowing up the budget until we got this, which is this abomination. Featuring some horrific, some terrifying looking CGI dwarves. I'm like, why don't you just hire regular dwarves? Peter Dinklage, okay? He had all that shit to say about, like, oh, they shouldn't be getting dwarf actors in movies. Like, first of all, Peter Dinklage, you're a talented man. I like you a lot, all right? You're great in Game of Thrones. You've given great performances throughout your career in TV and film. But you are not king of the dwarves, okay? What you say is not law for all dwarves, all right? So stop it. Like, they could have just hired those, because the dwarves in this movie are terrifying. But the rest of the movie, it's so flat and so dull. Funny enough, Rachel Zegler is the best thing about it. Like, she has a really good singing voice. It's probably what she's known for, coming off of stage and musicals and things like that. But the rest of the film's bad. And Gal Gadot gives one of the worst performances of her entire career, which is saying something, because most of her career is terrible performances, but she's so bad throughout this entire film. Awful remake. Not the worst, but perhaps in the conversation of the worst. Pinocchio is still the worst in my book. But it's not the second worst movie of 2025. No, the second worst movie of 2025, to me at least so far, is The Electric State, which is directed by the Russo brothers, and it's based off of a comic of the same name. Even though apparently it's a very loose adaptation, has very little to do with the actual comic book, because I guess the Russo brothers and Marcus and McFeely, who are also writing this movie, they knew better. I don't think they knew better. But essentially the movie is kind of set in this alternate 1990 or the 90s, where like in the 40s, like robotics became like really advanced and pioneered by Walt Disney, and that led to like this huge war between AI, between robots and humans. And eventually it was settled with the robots kind of quarantined to a specific region in the United States. But we pretty much follow Millie Bobby Brown, whose brother was the savant, he had the super autism chat, and he apparently died at some point, but then she is visited by this robot boy who claims to be her brother, and the robot, even though it can't talk for some reason, it just says fucking weird catchphrases. It tells her, you gotta go to this fucking zone where all the robos are to rescue me, right? And so she eventually meets Chris Pratt, who is, at this point, he's just Action Man. This is Action Man number 7 from him. I mean, he's not putting any effort into this movie. No, nor is really anyone else in this movie. You have a pretty stacked cast of people, like Jason Alexander, who's like an abusive dad. You have Woody Harrelson, Anthony Mackie, Brian Cox, Giancarlo Esposito, Stanley Tucci, who's playing like an evil, Tim Cook, Steve Jobs-esque character in the film. But like every single person is on autopilot in this movie, in this very just generic, flat sci-fi action tale. And the worst thing is, really, the thing that annoyed me the most about this film, other than just like the creepy robot designs and how nothing is funny, and like you have Mr. Peanut who's the president of the robots. I'm like, I don't care. You're not doing anything interesting with that. Nothing funny with that. The thing that like really annoyed me the most about this film is how no one in this movie is likable. Like all these fucking characters, all they do is yell at each other. Like from beginning to end, until they don't, when the script requires them, like, well, we all gotta fucking come together and defeat, evil Steve Jobs, played by Stanley Tucci, right? But Millie Bobby Brown and Chris Pratt have anti-chemistry in this film. I mean, what's written for them, how they're directed, they're just despicable people. You just really, really dislike them. And the aesthetic for this movie, I really didn't care for any of the robot design. Probably just because I just didn't like any of the robots. They were just weird and off-putting and kind of stereotypical. It's like, well, one's like a baseball robot, so all it does is like baseball puns. I'm like, oh god, I can't stand something like that. Or you have the brother robot, he's like a mascot for something, and he's just saying catchphrases from the cartoon show the robot is and what was in or whatever. I'm just like, I just can't stand this. It's so annoying. Really, the only person that has like a bit of a like an arc is Giancarlo Esposito in the movie, and but you don't really care though by the end of the film because you're just so annoyed by all of these characters. So yes, Electric State is my second worst movie of 2025. But number one is presented by one of the worst filmmakers working today, and that is Gareth Edwards' Jurassic World Rebirth. Listen, at this point, we should just expect this with the Jurassic Park, the Jurassic World franchise. Even though maybe you can point to like one of the sequels being better than the others, like none of them have managed to be as good as the original Jurassic Park, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. I love that film. I think it's a genre masterpiece. I think it's one of Steven Spielberg's best films ever. But the sequels, especially these world movies, they just seemingly keep getting worse and worse and worse because they just don't really care about the characters at all. They're not really like introducing any new or interesting ideas with them. And Rebirth is the same. It's set essentially 5 years after the events of Jurassic World Dominion, which I still think is the worst Jurassic Park film. But Rebirth, I would say, is a very close second. And due to Earth's changing climate, essentially all the dinosaurs have died out. So that cool idea, like, oh, the dinosaurs on the mainland. It's like, nah, you like grasshoppers. Like, we don't like grasshoppers. You don't like locusts. What if they all died out? No. They're like, they're all dead. So they're all dead now. But that's okay because we still have islands of dinosaurs. And on this remote island near the equator, you have this another dinosaur island that's not Isla Nublar, that's not Isla Sorna. And it's another InGen outpost where apparently it's a refuge for all the weird muty dinosaurs that InGen made. Spared no expense, John Hamm. He spared no expense. And this pharmaceutical company, they send Scarlett Johansson and Mahershala Ali and Jonathan Bailey, who have no characters. Like literally, Gareth Edwards he's gotten so bad as a filmmaker now that he is essentially borrowing things from other terrible filmmakers like Zack Snyder, where he's like, I'm just going to have my characters sit around a table and just tell things. Like tell certain things about their backstories. Like Scarlett Johansson's character's mom died and her friend in Yemen got blown up in a car bomb. Are we going to see these scenes? Nah, we don't need to. Mahershala Ali got divorced because his son died. We're going to see those scenes? Nah, you don't need to. Fucking need to. And we got an annoying family. Who doesn't need to be in the movie at all, but we need that family because, Jurassic Park always needs a kid in there. We've always got to have kids in danger. And so the mercenaries that are sent to this island to get dino goop, essentially, to cure heart disease and stuff, they find these shipwreck civilians, bring them on the boat, and then, chaos ensues as they eventually enter the island. This movie is completely wretched across the board. It does nothing new. Matter of fact, it just references or recreates entire scenes and sequences from the original film, and you name it, chat. I mean, the scene with the flare of Ian Malcolm, they do that with Mahershala Ali in this movie. The scene with the Velociraptors walking around the kitchen stalking the kids. They do that in this movie, except it's stepping on fucking bottles of Mountain Dew. The scene when they first see the brontosaurus, the sauropods, and the herds, like they do move in herds. Like they recreate that scene in this movie with the same music, the same John Williams theme. I mean, just time and time again. And the other thing about it is there's just so much obnoxious advertising throughout this entire movie. It is so terrible. It's so terrible. Like the stars of this movie are not Scarlett Johansson, Mahershala Ali, or whoever. No, the stars of this movie are Twizzlers, are Doritos, are Mountain Dew, Snickers. The opening of this movie is all about Snickers, Chad. That's what this movie is. Where even though you like, for example, you had Dennis Nedry. They kind of recreate the scene with Dennis Nedry, where Dennis Nedry, who you know is sabotages Jurassic Park to steal a dino DNA. Here it's done by a Snickers, where a fat guy eating a Snickers, Chad, drops his candy bar in this very secure facility. It's supposed to be quarantined, like no outside contamination. This fat guy drops the wrapper, gets sucked in the ventilation system, and apparently, Chad, that destroys security systems. Like, don't have Snickers do that, okay? I mean, Jesus Christ. Completely destroys the security system, unleashing the dinosaurs, unleashing the Derposaurus Rex, which is walled-eyed and cross-eyed at the same time. Like, the lights are on, chat, but no one's home inside that thing's fucking head, and it looks stupid. It's so dumb. I'm tired of these mutant dinosaurs. They suck. They have dragon dinosaurs in this. They're not good. They're just flying raptors. But this thing, oh my God, they don't know what to do with it. And really, it's not even in the movie all that much. It's in the first 5 minutes, and then it's in the last 15. So if you're excited about Derposaurus Rex, sorry, he's not that exciting. And then the other thing, and the thing is, they're just so inconsistent with the lore and the story itself. It's like, why you explain that this island is home to just mutants, just mutant dinosaurs. So then why do we have like a regular T-Rex around? Why do we have like regular sauropods? Like it's like, what, it doesn't make any sense. You know, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You know, no one has a character arc. Everyone's annoying. Everything is just there to sell a product. And I think you can make a very good argument that this might be the worst Jurassic Park. But I think Dominion's still the worst. But still, it's really bad. It's awful. Gareth Edwards is one of the absolute worst filmmakers working today. He is the very definition of a hack. But that, my friends, that is my top 10 worst movies of 2025. What about you guys? What are your top 10 worst films of 2025? Are any of my movies in your lists? You know, or maybe some of these movies might be in your best of. Maybe you actually like some of these films. Let me know.